guys. Hello, gorgeous. Welcome to the newest segment on my YouTube channel, Cartoon Commentary. For longtime viewers of Armchair Directors, you're familiar with my movie commentaries on that channel, so I wanted to take the same concept and bring it over to my solo channel for some classic cartoons. I find that having a movie, or in this case a TV show, running in the background makes the discussion more dynamic. It sparks ideas, provokes asides and filibusters, brain farts, and just generally keeps things moving along at a steady pace. For this inaugural episode of Cartoon Commentary, I wanted to go back and revisit one of my favorite cartoons as a kid, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero by Sunbow Animation. And who better to join me than the guys who inspired the ultimate USS flag, which I just recently reviewed on my YouTube channel. G.I. Joeberg is the code name for South Africa's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force. Its purpose, to entertain. First is Paul. Paul, say hi.
Hey there, guys. Hi.
And Paul, where are you coming to us from?
I'm coming to you from Joburg, South Africa, which is a little up north from my two other partners in crime.
And it's actually called Joburg.
Yeah, it's actually called Joburg. Oh, Joburg is a colloquialism. It's actually called Johannesburg.
Ah, gotcha. That's what I figured, yeah. But still, that's an interesting coincidence. Great to have you on the podcast. And we also have Robert.
Hello there, Robert, talking to you from Cape Town.
Cape Town, South Africa. And we've also got Stephen.
AKA the Gaius Baltar of G.I. Joeberg. Well, that's the handle that I've been given these days. I'm joining you guys from Cape Town, South Africa. And since, Mike, you're from Toronto, it seems like we are international heroes.
That's right. Just outside of Toronto, just to make that clear, I would never survive in a big city like Toronto. But I think it is a little interesting that the real American hero, and all of us here, none of us are American. We got a Canadian and 3 South Africans. So, interesting.
So poop's gonna get real.
It's gonna get really real. So for the first cartoon commentary, what we're going to be doing is The Cobra Strikes, which is the first ever episode of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero by Sunbow. So we're going to give everybody listening to this a chance to sync up. And hey, if you don't want to sync up the DVD, if you don't want to watch the episode, if you want to just play this as a podcast in the background on your way to work or on your MP3 player or whatnot, that's fine too. You don't even have to watch it. But if you want to add something a little fresh to a cartoon episode you may have seen a couple dozen or 100 times, here's your chance to sync up with us. So pop in your DVD or load up the video. I believe it's on Dailymotion. It might be on YouTube as well. We all have our DVDs synced up. The little blue dot is next to The Cobra Strikes on the DVD menu. And I'm going to give you a countdown from 3. And 3, 2, 1, go. And on go, we're going to press play. Everybody ready?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we hit there.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. And the Sky Strikers. And the bombs
The
bursting
second
in air.
best G.I. Joe vehicle.
Second best. Well, I guess the flag. The flag is an environment, though, not necessarily a vehicle. I guess it is.
I was talking about the flag, Mike.
Oh, my goodness. Controversy already. What are we? 20 seconds into the...
Okay, well, we don't have time for a full-length podcast on the subject, but what's everyone's favorite G.I. Joe vehicle?
A warthog.
That's a nice one. I got to go with, if it's not the flag, then it's the Sky Striker. Can't beat a classic.
Yeah,
It's a pretty jet. I'm going to go with the Tomahawk. The Sky Striker is its perfection, and it's the best jet ever released, but it is still a jet, and how much fun can you have playing jet?
And for you flying vehicle fans there, also featured in my USS Flag review, you may have noticed some of my vehicles are on flight stands, and I've had some people ask about those. You can get those on eBay. Just search for G.I. Joe flight stand, and he has all sorts of flight stands and all sorts of positions. There's takeoff positions, banking positions. You want to definitely check that out. But getting back to
segue, though, because this is a money shot right here. Oh, my goodness.
On the longest runway ever. Even Snake Eyes is like, get down!
Sorry. He's got that sixth sense.
There was some beautiful production values, though, with that runway shots. I mean,
oh, totally.
Let's talk about Snake Eyes here for a second. I always thought it was interesting that the toy famous for being all black, not a drop of paint used on him. But here in the cartoon, the mysterious man, not wearing gloves.
Yeah.
Takes a bit of the mystique away with him not wearing gloves.
And those purple goggles.
It's a very interesting choice.
Although I got to note, I do love in this opening scene, I do love a lot of the palette selection because they try to be as close to the figures as possible, with the exception of Stalker. Because I really love Scarlett's color choices.
We're 2 minutes into the episode, and Cobra is already attacking, blowing up Sky Strikers. You got Stalker doing the boogie.
Yeah.
Get down! Just because you're under attack doesn't mean you can't do it without style.
Flak being used appropriately.
There's Airborne just in the background. You can see a bunch of guys just in the background running. I saw Airborne and Gung Ho.
I love this because then Duke does a flip.
Unreal.
And then I love it. It's just so it's just very dramatic. And when he talks about
a little bit of chauvinism thrown in.
Yeah, he's a man of action. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes is the guy that dropped when the jet came in. So yeah. I don't know, Duke.
I think we all understand though that Scarlett she's not really the damsel in distress. She doesn't need anybody to rescue her. And that's the great thing about G.I. Joe. Before this whole change in TV and movies, the real empowerment of women, they were already doing this stuff in the early 80s with Princess Leia and Star Wars, but also with G.I. Joe. And even though there were only 2 female Joes at first, CoverGirl and Scarlett, and then later on Lady J, like they're pretty tough girls.
We also got a formidable villain as well in the form of the Baroness, which is great to show a strong female character as a bad guy.
Any idea what those jets are?
To me, they look like, I think they're called F-2000s. They look a bit like that to me, but I mean,
it was a trick question because I actually did the research. It's a Corvair Delta Dart. F-106, or at least that's the closest real world equivalent I could find for it. That perfect arrowhead without a tail plane.
And what is the deal? They weren't allowed to use actual realistic designs, or they chose not to.
It looked like it. They used a realistic design, lock, stock, and barrel. If I'm correct in assuming that it's a Delta Dart.
Oh, because the Sky Striker
but the Delta Dart was retired by that stage by 1980, I think.
Who used the Delta Dart? Sorry, Steve. Sorry,
it was the United States. So retired Army surplus gets into the hands of Cobra Command, I guess. That's why the Sky Strikers so easily fought them off.
But the Sky Striker, it looks a lot like an F-14, but it isn't exactly. Same with the Vamp. It isn't a genuine Jeep design.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, G.I. Joe always sort of added an X to the aircraft, giving it a kind of an experimental edge.
It was a very slight sci-fi edge, which I think they went too far with in the movies. But here's Destro's introduction.
What movies?
Yeah,
and Chris Latta's performance as Cobra Commander here early on in the show, he drops this later on, but in the early episodes, he really emphasizes the S's, which if you've read Buzz Dixon's newest Kindle Worlds book, The Most Dangerous Man in the World, he brings that back where everything that Cobra Commander says has about a dozen S's, which is pretty cool.
Sibilances.
Yes.
The bromance begins. It's kind of cool because Cobra Commander and Destro are friends here. And it's really interesting because they're not at each other's throats yet. And a few, or more often than not, Destro will put himself before Cobra Commander in the things that he says, which is interesting. And later on, it will turn into My Dear Cobra Commander. So, I mean, the bromance is starting here.
Yeah, that's a great point. This, even though it's a cartoon, it's an animated show, supposedly for children. The reason it stood the test of time, and I still pop it in and watch it and enjoy it, is because it's more than just an animated show. It feels like a real show with real character development. And, when you watch a new show, the actors don't know their characters yet, and they evolve as the years go by. It's exactly what's happened here. The characters of Cobra Commander and Destro have evolved. Same with all the Joes, too. Is this Flag? General Flag?
Yes, it is.
Interesting. So much different than the comic counterpart.
What I find very interesting is from the very start of the G.I. Joe cartoons, they featured Duke as kind of like the main character, which is curious because, I mean, he wasn't released, at least carded, until 1984, but he was like the exclusive, one of the 2 exclusive mail-away figures in 1983.
He was already on the shelves by the time the cartoon came out.
The American perspective.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Or Canadian.
And G.I. Joe, they didn't seem to ever have, as far as the toy line went, and then the cartoon followed the toy, or was instructed to, they didn't have a problem changing the leader. So in 84, it was Duke. 85, it was Flint, even though he was officially second in command. A lot of the episodes, Flint was featured as, you know, the commanding guy, the guy out in the field, while Duke was the administrative leader. And then again in 86, they just brought in Hawk out of nowhere and went, hey, this guy's your supreme leader now. Which kind of sucked for Duke to have to take a backseat to this. That's interesting about Hawk coming in as the new general, even though he had been there in terms of the toy line right from the beginning as one of the original 83 G.I. Joes, right? 82 G.I. Joes. But he had never appeared on the cartoon.
A little earlier, we got a little Easter egg for dedicated listeners. The Baroness in Disguise, sorry, spoiler alert, mentions a Form BX 256.
That's where that comes
7.
from.
Well, 257. Thank you, Steve.
So it wouldn't be a G.I. Joeberg podcast if I wasn't correcting you at least once, Paulie.
No, that's true. But yeah, Form BX is a great YouTube reviewer as well. I just want to throw him some props because we often mention him on our podcast, and it's just cool to see this little Easter egg.
Yeah, he is amazing. He is very thorough, and I love all the insight and the reviews that he does. Like from everything, huge play sets to individual little figures. He's great.
Mm-hmm. Baroness is totally telegraphing that her earring is a homing device. Yeah. The amount of time she sort of scratched it. It's like, yeah, we're not going to overlook that detail.
It's so interesting to see Snake Eyes here. This is before the legend of Snake Eyes was created. And he's just kind of a background masked dude. This is before all of Larry Hama's work on the comic, the Arashikage tattoo, the ninja. Right here, he's just a commando. Still a really magnetic character, the guy who just doesn't say anything, but knows what's going to happen before it happens.
I was going to add to your point earlier, Mike, about how characters have evolved and how every Joe fan either freezes their G.I. Joe world at a certain historical point or allows it to evolve as the media evolves it. To illustrate my point, I quite like the purity of where these characters are at when they're introduced. I like that Snake Eyes is a commando. I mean, he was the first guy to make that infiltration and hit his little sort of wrist computer, and that is the essence of the character. He's the lone soldier who gets in there first and paves the way for the rest. Mm-hmm. I'm less enchanted with the ninja backstory or the log cabin in the Sierras or the wolf or the Arashikage. I enjoy the purity that we are seeing in this very first miniseries.
Yeah, one of my favorite characters for sure, and I prefer him in the original costume in the early episodes. Even though I love the look of the visor and the sword and timber, I prefer the commando version of Snake Eyes more. And he never really did go full ninja in the cartoon, though. Even in the later episodes. Even though he had
just full breakdowns.
Well, yeah.
Well, they had to push into the background because his character has no voice. I mean, they could have changed that, but I mean, he's the silent master, essentially.
Yeah.
I got to agree with Rob there. I also appreciate that in the cartoon, Snake Eyes is kind of a non-thing, a non-entity in a lot of ways. Although I love the character, I just feel that he dominates the comics so heavily that it's great that the other characters...
gunfire.
Yeah, yes. Interesting.
Yeah.
Even though it's laser bolts being fired, we're getting actual bullets and machine gun fire.
I don't know. The way it's animated, those could be traces.
Yeah,
Oh,
it does have that, yeah. It does have that every third shot look.
And
thing.
certainly the pistols that Flag and Duke are firing, I mean, those look like muzzle flashes.
Yeah.
They didn't have the gaudy red laser beam effect.
Coming out of the Colt-ish looking gun.
I know, right?
Something that this episode does particularly well that I enjoy is how it sets up both G.I. Joe's efficiency as a team and Cobra's efficiency, because G.I. Joe earlier infiltrated this military installation and did so quite easily. And then when the Baroness in the Sky sort of mentions, that's like it's great, whatever, and then the Colonel turns around, yeah, it's adequate. That means the security is adequate. Blah blah blah. Their mission isn't to steal it. It's it was just to get in, kind of thing. But then Cobra also rocks up, so it just lets us know that both Cobra and G.I. Joe are sort of on even footing, or at least at this time in the series.
Different sides of the
I
same
don't know,
coin.
man. You had 3 or 4 Joes against a Cobra platoon with armor, and they managed to fight them back.
But there isn't as much bumbling as there is in later episodes and later seasons here.
Yeah, there's some definite Duke Harrison Ford pointing and talking going on, which is always fun. He does that a lot, by the way, listeners. If you guys watch throughout the show, he often points and talks at the same time. I think that is something that was actually borrowed from Han Solo.
The Hauser finger.
Yeah, the Hauser finger.
That's another thing I really loved about G.I. Joe growing up, that these guys weren't just given code names on the file cards, brilliantly written by Larry Hama. These guys were given full identities, so it's not just Duke, it's Conrad Hauser. Each guy has a very realistic sounding name. It's not like they just named him, John
Arbuckle.
or something tougher like, John Iron. I appreciate that some of these names are just out in left field, like Clayton Abernathy. Like, they sound so realistic. It brings a realism to a cartoon.
Yeah.
I appreciate that our blonde-haired, blue-eyed American boy has a very German-sounding name.
Conrad Hauser. Exactly.
Hauser.
Exactly.
I'm Conrad Hauser. It's a terrible accent. I apologize in advance.
That's another great thing about G.I. Joe. It wasn't typical and predictable. It just had a realism to it. And I think Larry Hama, with the file cards, injected a lot of that thanks to his military experience.
I'd like to think that the file name or the idea of file names came from him to ground it all in reality. I mean, very famously, like, all they did in Hasbro board meetings would show the card art to Larry Hama and have a specialty like Commando or Counterintelligence, and he would have to come up with the rest.
Now, this is a kind of a brave decision in terms of the story of the episode, having Duke captured, the leader of G.I. Joe. You would think in an establishing episode or an establishing miniseries, the leader would pretty much be golden. You wouldn't get one over on him. But here, first episode, Duke is captured.
And it's not the first time either. I mean, it'll be the first of many times.
No, but there he is. Who's
Famously.
that? Oh no, it's Steeler. Never mind.
Steeler.
Also, that
Saw the blonde
establishing. I've watched this episode countless times now, and that establishing shot completely confuses me. Because it shows Paris. Does that mean G.I. Joe is secretly located in Paris? I mean, now it comes full circle, and we know that Cobra is using their device on it. Also, incidentally, the only episode of G.I. Joe John Chu, G.I. Joe fan, has ever watched.
Yeah.
For making
destroy
the movie.
that Eiffel Tower.
Yep. So, but
Hey,
yeah.
look, if he remade this episode of the miniseries in a feature film format, I would have actually enjoyed that.
Yeah.
A great deal more than accelerator suits and underwater battles a la Thunderball.
Oh, sorry, that was Stephen Summers. My bad. My apologies.
I like
the
second movie. I thought it was an improvement over the first one, but still, it's about as much as I like the first Transformers movie. It's okay, but the potential could have been off the charts. It just didn't capture the feel, the magic of G.I. Joe.
Something that strikes me on this scene as well. Sorry, man. Duke mentions brainwave technology or brainwashing technology. It scares me a little because that means he's encountered it before, either because his government uses it or because they've been trained with it. So that means that it's something that exists in this universe. I've also always felt that this scene tries to establish that Cobra's legions are actually brainwashed. Brainwashed people, and the lady who helps Duke has got a bit of a Latin accent to her, so I would imagine that Cobra recruits a lot of its soldiers from communist countries. I mean, at least that's what I feel the cartoon tries to sort of shoehorn in there, but I could be completely wrong.
That's a good point. It makes you wonder because they have countless legions of troopers, and why would all these guys be loyal to an evil organization? They don't make any bones about. There's no ambiguity here. Cobra is evil. They want to dominate the world.
They're making bones, man. Yeah. I think it's all about material wealth, and their soldiers are probably paid better. I can only imagine. If you read the Viper file card, I know I'm jumping a few years, but it goes on about how if you want to climb the ladder in Cobra and reach the glittering prizes at the top, you start out as a Viper. Mm-hmm. So I think, above all else, what motivates a Cobra operative is greed. They're not owing allegiance to any kind of nationality. They've got no invested national pride. It's all about just, I don't know, making bank. I mean, perfect example, Major Blood. He's a mercenary. He'll fight for anyone if the price is right.
The thing I like about this first episode is that even though this was originally conceived to be a toy commercial show, they're not really beating you over the head with the vehicles. Like in some cartoons, when they get into a vehicle, oh, this special battle feature is going to come in handy right now. Drop the hook on the dragonfly. They don't do that here.
Yeah, it feels very real.
They're just they're a means. They're not the.
It's just there.
They don't deviate from the action that's happening in the story to put in a little commercial.
Very true. I mean, a lot of that is very subliminal because of the characters in the lineup in the opening. I've always found G.I. Joe to be very classy with that, at least in the Sunbow run.
Oh yeah, let's not bring up Deke.
Yeah,
not just yet. And less is more. It as a kid made me want this stuff more when I wasn't beat over the head with it.
Yeah, there's an air of mystery. I remember watching this tune when I was younger, not when it was broadcast originally, but seeing a lot of vehicles I had no familiarity with, and actually trying to find out their names, and then looking in the catalogs to find out what those were called. So that was great. I mean, and then also by extension, the video game. I didn't know what the Buzzball was until I actually finished the game, and it said Buzzball in the credits. But that was great to find out it was an actual thing. It wasn't so in your face. Oh, here comes the sport.
Duke is voice acted by the great Michael Bell, who Star Trek fans will remember appeared in the first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation as the long-haired dude.
The long-haired dude?
Well, one of the alien dudes. I don't remember his name, but as soon as I heard his voice, I knew exactly who it was.
Yeah, Michael Bell is super famous. He appears in many video games. The one that comes to mind the quickest is actually Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. Mm. He is the voice of the omnipotent sort of overseer kind of character that brings Raziel back to life.
Yeah, he's a very talented actor and has played a lot of different characters, but there's just something familiar about his voice, his cadence. Perfect guy to play Duke. Very, heroic sounding, but also he's got that military aspect where he can sound like he's barking out quick, concise orders.
Yes, very like curt. Bacteria brain.
Very curt. And I love the slight accent. I don't know if it's, New Hampshire or something, some kind of a accent that he's added there, but I appreciate that.
Bread. Yeah.
And I like that a lot of the Joes had area-specific accents. Oh, that's the end of that episode.
Well, I just Well, mine's still running.
Well, the we're into a recap
Recap, yeah.
or a preview for the next episode.
Or toy commercial
A trailer.
for snakes.
Some people call them trailers. I call them commercials.
Or as I like to see it, or that section as I like to see it as, look at G.I. Joe beating up the He-Man-ish lookalike.
Mm-hmm.
Hey kids, G.I. Joe's better than He-Man. Subtle kind of nod.
And I always enjoyed these little previews because they always said the same thing. If you think you've seen some action, you haven't seen anything yet. And this end song theme, just great. Very military sounding, marching sound.
Yeah, very, and something that it sadly loses much later, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they get a lot more of the the big sounding fanfare, orchestra sound. I like this kind of dialed back music from the first miniseries.
So this kind of reminds you that this might deal with violence and violent themes, but everything's okay. The military is still good fun at the end of the day. Let's play out with a marching band.
Well, gents, I feel like we just scratched the surface. That was nice. That was very brisk, and that's what I really like about watching classic cartoons. 22 minutes long, or 23 or 24, but without the commercials, just you sit down. I like to a lot of the time do a workout, maybe a little bit of cycling on the cycling machine or the elliptical. But yeah, they're quick, easy breezy.
23 minutes is perfect for a number of physical activities.
Not a big investment, or even just sitting and chilling for a little bit.
Or just nodding off to sleep. So, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed your 23 minutes with us.
Yeah, this was fun. What are your final thoughts on the very first ever episode, the introduction to animated G.I. Joe? Let's start with Paul.
As a big fan of Sambo, I and having acquired this box set long after the show had aired and run its course, it was a great introduction. Sometimes the first episodes of a show can feel very, very hokey. This is a miniseries that pulls you in. This is an episode that pulls you in quite quickly. You get to see who's good and who's bad. You get to see a lot of, I don't know, the hallmarks of the series. A lot of the tropes are established, and it always has me wanting more. So that's pretty much my takeaway. Plus, it always gets me hungry to buy toys. So.
On eBay.
If I was a kid, it would get me hungry to buy toys on Saturday.
Yeah. So. Robert, how about you?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. But what kind of scares me more is that even though the main technological thing that they're trying to combat here is the M.A.S.S device, I'm more scared of these brain control things.
We didn't mention the M.A.S.S device.
Weaponized those?
We didn't mention the M.A.S.S device once during the entire commentary. I think that's awesome, but that's a good point. Yeah, the brainwasher.
Yeah, they're crazy, but it's like they've never ever used them. Like, you could do so much more with that. You could just control the leaders of the world to do whatever you want.
I mean, it brings the leader of G.I. Joe down to his knees to give you a really impactful image.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it leaves you thinking how they're ever going to come back from this.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Stephen, thoughts on G.I. Joe Episode 1?
For all its brevity, it's able to set up very distinct character relationships, and I really enjoy that. It has a bit of aerial action, which always gets a nod from me because I love the jets of the line. It shows some infiltration, Joes doing what they do best, or the sneaky Joes doing what they do best. It's got humor. It's Ron Friedman writing perhaps at its best, because we're not tired of the same old gimmickry. The interplay between Scarlet and Duke is amusing and perfectly played by the voice talent. Cobra Commander, I'm not entirely on side with him just yet, but he's got such a striking look that you can't help but not like it. And Destro. I mean, Destro pretty much calling the shots at this point. I mean, it's just tick, and more tick. What intrigues me the most, however, is the character that we do not have an action figure of at, as of airing in September of 1983, and that's the Baroness.
Mm-hmm.
she's possibly the linchpin of the piece. And unfortunately, it'll be a full year before we see her on pegs. But what am I even talking about? I wasn't even born by then, man.
Mhm.
I feel so deprived. It's like unearthing this treasure trove in my adult life. That I was reared on the 90s G.I. Joe toys and cartoons. Imagine how much better it could have been.
I remember going to Toys R Us and the other toy stores in town in the 80s and seeing these things on the pegs. And I remember not being able to find a Duke, but there were tons of Baroness and Scarlet because the boys just didn't want to buy a girl G.I. Joe. Different time.
That became quite a sought-after figure for myself because when I realized Baroness and Scarlet had existed in the late 90s in trying to get G.I. Joes, those were two figures I was trying to get my hands on desperately, along with Snake Eyes, of course. So it's interesting how times change.
And as far as my thoughts go for this, I like how it just jumps right into it. It doesn't have an introduction to a single character. There is no exposition of someone sitting there reading Duke's dossier. They don't care. Much like Larry Hama's comic writing, he just doesn't care if you don't understand who these people are or what they're saying. So I like that it just immediately begins. We're in the situation. There's no exposition. There's an air attack immediately. And for me, one of the best things about the G.I. Joe Sunbow series was the dialogue too. It's not just all about the action and the cool vehicles fighting each other, but the really glib, quirky, funny dialogue.
I missed you, Duke. Yeah, by about this much.
That's a good line. And once again, bacteria brain, and kick the mustard out of, and all those kind of ham-fisted
kick the mustard out of that hot dog before she smears us, or before he smears us. The reveal of the fact that it was Scarlet being a hotshot pilot in the Sky Striker is terrific, but then it all gets undermined by the fact that who jumps in the front seat of the Sky Striker to fight off Major Blood?
The man.
And the attacking Cobra aircraft. Exactly. Scarlet gets to be his RIO.
I feel like we've just scratched the surface, guys. Thanks so much for joining me with this commentary, and I hope I can have you back for more of these.
That would be wonderful, Mike. Thanks for listening, everybody.
All right, guys. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again very shortly for G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, Episode 2, Slaves of the Cobra Master. Nerdmas Day.